Inside here is the biggest locomotive I have ever had on this channel, and it's a Union Pacific. Let's get this open and we'll check it out. So it didn't come with an outside box, but it did come in this polystyrene tray, and underneath the lid here we've got the handrails that go onto this model, all made of metal, but you can see that they've never been fitted. So I'm very optimistic, even though I got this model second hand, I think it's probably never been run. Anyway, let's get the rest of it out. It's going to be quite difficult, so I'm just going to cut to having it all out of the packaging. So check the size of this, it's absolutely incredibly huge. Obviously an American locomotive, Union Pacific 638 in the classic Union Pacific yellow, red and grey livery. And it's also got the silver trucks as well. Lots of detail to enjoy on this. And you've probably guessed by now this is actually G-Scale. And if you just hold on a second, I'll get Jim along. Remember he's OO scale, and I'll get him to climb on board and he can see the difference. Jim, come over here. So there we have Jim stood on the bonnet there, and it really gives you an idea of this absolute scale of this locomotive. And if you need any more proof, here is a Hornby Class 25 by comparison. It's just incredible how big this locomotive is. You're going to have some size of layout to run this. Anyway, let's try and have a closer look at this model and we'll see what we've got here. So it is pretty difficult to get this in shot, and normally I handle these models. This one's just far too big, so I'll try my best to point things out to you. We're starting here at the front of the locomotive, and down the bottom we've got some jumper cables which have been added on as extra parts. The coupling should sit in here, but there doesn't seem to be any couplings with this model. They might have just been lost over time, because this was sold to me as a second-hand model, even though I actually think this is brand new and never been used before. Anyway, we have a bit of red paint across here, but it's not been applied too well. Just over these cap covers here was a little bit of bleed of the grey. Then as we come to the bonnet, the top part here has been masked off and painted in green, but not too well. It's a little bit fuzzy just in this corner here. But what is really good is the printing on here, the Union Pacific logo and the number, very clear even with the little black line around it. We also have these lights here which look as though they're probably illuminated, and then as we look further back we've got some flush fit glazing with windscreen wipers as added parts, but there is quite a lot of gap here in the door frame. It's not a very convincing door, and also the door handle here isn't that well defined either. Up here we've got the number board and another pair of lights which look as though they're illuminated as well, and we've got some flashing on the top here. And as I did that, you can see that this model actually wobbles quite a bit as well. So already I'm thinking there was a lot of opportunity here to make this a really good model, but I think some compromises have been made for price. And you can see things like this part down here where there's meant to be a chain, and it's not very well molded into the main body plastic. As we look down the side of the locomotive, you can see inside we have a driver in there and a fully detailed cab interior, but it isn't painted at all. It's all just grey plastic, but there are some dials there. So the window does have a bit of movement. You can move it back and forward, just sliding it there. And down here we have a sticker put on here for the General Electric with all the details of the locomotive and the locomotive running number and dependable transportation. Again, this is very nicely applied. All the lettering on this is well done. We have a red band running the whole length of the locomotive down the bottom, which has been painted very nicely. And as we move further down the locomotive, the Union Pacific writing here, again very clear. The hatches all the way along here are moulded into the main piece of plastic, but they are not very well defined. They could be a lot better, I think. But these little brackets for the handrails do look quite good in the bottom base part here. And then down this end of the locomotive we have this part which is meant to be a grille, but this is actually a piece of see-through plastic which has been printed over the top of. It's quite a neat effect, it looks quite convincing, but if you run your finger over it, it's just completely smooth. We do have this ladder added on as an extra part here, and there is some little bits of detail down here that aren't so good. The moulding mark is a bit scrappy there. And now at this end of the locomotive we have a very similar thing up here with a number and another two lights, as well as these lights as well. This is very well defined on this door, and it opens up to show some switches. We'll have a look at those in a moment. So that's quite a neat way of hiding those things. And then down here we have the same issue with the red on the part here and jumper cables added on, and again no coupling. The roof section here has got some representation of grills, but they're not really that well defined. Then we have this part here for the exhaust, which is a separate piece added in, and it has a hole straight through inside this model. I think there's something in there. It might actually have some smoke generator. I'm not quite sure. I think we'll need to open it up and check it out. These two panels here look like extra parts that have been added on, but they don't lift off at all. And then finally here we have two really not badly defined horns, but you can see there's moulding marks running along the top of them. Another panel with some rivet detail, and then the cab roof, which is quite plain. And looking down below, we've got these bogies which are made of silver plastic, and they have really nice metal wheels in there. These are actually sprung on metal springs. There is suspension on this model, but the brake blocks aren't in line with the treads, but they're not too bad, they're nicely defined. Further down towards the middle of the locomotive, we've got a representation of a bell here and another tank underneath. Fuel tank where you can see that it has a space to fit a speaker. And then we've got another air tank here with some pipe work to it, and another bogie which is the same as the one at the other end, and again has the suspension on it, which is quite neat. So these little switches here, top one says smoke, then it says light, and then it says motor. So that's quite interesting. Must have a smoke generator in here. So it's quite interesting that these are added in and they're behind this hatch on the front of the locomotive. Quite a neat setup, I think. I'll leave this open for now as we take this apart and we'll see what it's like inside. Well, that certainly felt like there was a million screws holding that locomotive together, but we got there in the end. As we were taking it apart, we took the bonnet off here, and sadly this isn't actually illuminated. It doesn't have any bulbs in here, so these front lights don't work. And I'm also not sure whether the lights at the front of the locomotive up here work either. The fuel tank here, it looks as though it would have a speaker in here, and possibly some of these models do come with sound. This one doesn't, although it did have a connector underneath the chassis, but it doesn't actually connect to anything inside here, and there's no speaker. The chassis is all made of plastic, and it is quite interesting that the two motors are actually integral into the bogies. That's quite a neat arrangement. And up here we've got some circuitry and some connectors which connect up to some other features up in the body. There is a weight in the middle held on with a couple of bolts, but this is just flimsy plastic really. And the main body moulding has indeed got a smoke generator here, which is connected up to the circuit board here up in the nose. And you can see that it's quite a simple multi-plug connector to the chassis. And up here where the cab is, there's another one as well, which runs up to a bulb up inside the cab there, and it might actually give illumination to the front here too. And if you wanted to take this apart, you could take these screws off and take the cab details out and give it a paint job or whatever it is you wanted to do. So this is a bit of a strange combination where it's got the smoke generator in it, but it doesn't have lights in something as basic as the front nose cone of this locomotive. So it's a bit of a strange combination. Anyway, I'm going to try and get this back together, put in all those screws, and then we'll move on to the next part of the review. Okay, we're all back together and nothing got broken, which is great. I'm going to put this on the scales and see if we can get a weight. I'm not optimistic because it's so heavy, but let's give it a go. Well, I've managed to get it on the scales and it is indeed quite a heavy weight. It comes in at 2 kilograms, 711 grams. So this Union Pacific number 638, what a massive model this is. I'm still not quite sure who made this model. I'll look it up on the internet and add it onto the video afterwards in post-production. But this is certainly impressive just by its sheer bulk. And it's going to have to be a really big layout in order to be able to run this model. Probably a garden layout, I would suspect. It is in G-Scale, and I think G-Scale offers the modeler an opportunity to put in extra levels of detail that smaller scales can't do. However, I've actually seen O-gauge models look much better than this model, and this one feels as though it's a little bit kind of toy-like. I think they could have done an awful lot better on this. Mechanically, the two big motors inside the bogies are quite an interesting way of doing it, and I quite like that as well. It certainly seems as though it has a lot of power to be able to get round a track and pull quite a long train as well. There's a lot of nice little touches on this locomotive, but it's a bit of an oddity. It's got lighting in certain places but not in obvious other places, and it's got a smoke generator, but I think instead of doing that they could have just put extra lighting onto this model and it would have made it a lot better. It does look as though you can get this model in different options with some sound fitted into the fuel tank underneath, and maybe you get an enhanced lighting kit as well. I'm not 100% sure. These are very rare here in the UK. I've never seen one of these before, but I have seen European models made by companies like LGB, and they also seem to follow a similar kind of style where they look a bit plasticky. I guess it's maybe to do with making them affordable rather than super detailed models, but I do think G-Scale offers the modeler something where they can add infinite amounts of detail onto their models if they want to. Maybe this is a good base model in order to be able to do that and make this into something really quite cool looking. But this is certainly a characterful locomotive with a lot of presence, and it would look very impressive going around any garden layout. So I hope you like my analysis of this model. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this Union Pacific locomotive, and if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps this channel grow. Now, I can't put this on the turntable because it would just break my turntable, it's so big and heavy, so I'll put a few more close-up shots of this locomotive as I sign off. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll put a link on screen to another video I've done. Click it now to watch that as well, and I'll see you over there. Thanks for watching this video. See ya!